All right, well, let's get started. It's great to see everybody. We're very excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Agile Decisioning Governance, Accelerating Technology ROI in the Agentic Era. As we all know, enterprises are investing heavily in digital transformation, upgrading everything from ERP platforms and hundreds of other data and IT initiatives in order to prepare for the AI era. Unfortunately, poor governance across portfolio and architecture decisions are costing companies millions each year, and potentially worse, the slow and effective decisioning are letting the competition get ahead. So in today's webinar, Sam Kishinevski will be talking about how agile decisioning governance, powered by decision intelligence, can actually help address these challenges. So the agenda for today, we're going to include a presentation describing agile IT decisioning governance. We'll talk about real-world use cases. We'll do a brief demo, and then we're going to save about 10 to 15 minutes at the back half for any Q&A. So as Sam presents the webinar, feel free to post any questions that you might have in the Q&A box on your screens. I'm going to act as a moderator, and throughout the presentation, I'm going to be interjecting a bit to make sure that all of your questions are answered. So as always, if you have any additional questions after the webinar, we're very happy to connect. Just email myself at lanny@cloverpop.com or sam@cloverpop.com. Just a very brief, introduction to the team here. My name is Lanny Royberg, one of the co-founders of Cloverpop. I'll be acting as a moderator and leading the conversation today. We have Sam Kishinevski. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Sam Kishinevski. As Lanny mentioned, I lead the decision intelligence practice at Cloverpop, deploying our platform and really the agile decision governance approach, primarily across large enterprises, across CPG and life sciences. Very excited to take you guys through some of the elements that we've been seeing across the industry today and share some best practices. So thank you again very much for joining. So for those of you that don't know, just very briefly, Cloverpop is a leading decision intelligence company, primarily serving large enterprises across the Fortune 500. And so, just to kick off the topic today, right? So really, what are we seeing happening in the world right now? Despite a lot of uncertainty, IT spends continue to rise, really driven by a continued mass increase in AI investments. We're seeing around 50% year over year increase from 24 to 25 as CEOs continue to pursue their AI first agendas. And really, the expectations have been absolutely massive around what these investments can potentially yield from, up to a third of working hours being automated, adding global GDP, really equivalent to adding a G7 nation to the global economy. And really, almost 2/3 of CEOs are expecting AI to be the single defining element of competition over the next 10 years. However, these expectations really have yet to be realized. We continue to see, around 70% of technology transformations failing to achieve the outcomes that they set out to. And that number tends to be, over 80% when we're talking about AI-related projects. And I'm sure, as you all know, the MIT study as well that was quoting, upwards of 95%. And so as a result of this increasing incredibly high investment in technology and AI transformations, yet still seeing these high failure rates, most enterprises are behind their plans in 2025. And so what can we start to learn from these initial deployments? What are we seeing? A few key items. So number one, where we see failure is hype over value. A lot of excitement around AI, pushing, pushing, pushing. However, seeing disparate use cases popping up, not clearly attached to the value and the outcomes specifically that they're going to drive. Failure point number 2 is deploying the AI or the technology transformations without the requisite governance and change required to ensure adoption. So models being deployed, not necessarily integrated into processes, insufficient training. As a result, not seeing the impact that we would expect. Failure point number 3, information without insight. So providing business users and others with a flood of analysis, a flood of information, without very clear, concise, actionable insights to go forward on. And so really, what are we seeing? We see that AI does create value when it is anchored to specific business goals and outcomes. It's designed for how people work and integrated into those ways of working, and built specifically to turn information into action. And when those key items fail, hype over value, models without mindset shifts, information without insight, we are seeing some pretty spectacular failures across the industry. So, first example here is McDonald's was attempting to leverage AI for their drive-through orders. And what ended up happening is customers were not having a great experience. There was a video on TikTok, for those of you that may not have seen it, where the person at the drive-through kept on asking the AI to stop adding chicken nuggets to their order. They ended up trying to charge them for over 260 chicken nuggets. So this video went viral. McDonald's ended up pulling back the initiative. Second one, I'm sure has been in the news lately. Deloitte is refunding the Australian government for leveraging AI within the report. And so this piece really is around models without mindset shift, meaning that AI was deployed for the analysts to be using at Deloitte without likely a full understanding of how to leverage it appropriately and where the pitfalls may be. And so as a result, right, there were non-existent academic references within the report. They even made up a quote about a federal judgment without catching it. And number 3, information without insight. So the example here is around Watson being deployed within the healthcare and oncology space in order to fulfill this vision of better, faster healthcare outcomes. However, oftentimes the recommendations themselves were coming up as inappropriate or even unsafe, and so much of that investment has, as a result, been pulled back. And so it's fair to ask then, how does this happen when we've set out strong business cases up front when we start out? And typically we actually do have strong delivery. And so really what's happening? So we're starting with a strong, simple business case. Something like we're going to get faster, we're going to get more reliable, we're going to have a massive ROI on the investment in this new technology AI transformation. However, underneath that business case is some conflicting value propositions. The CEO wants the flashy Ferrari. It goes, super fast. It's loud. The business users want something a bit more practical, reliable. And so the objectives get set, yet they're somewhat misaligned. We want it to be fast and loud, yet reliable and efficient. We take those objectives and we set up specific key results that are aligned to the business objectives that were set out. Right. So we want to be fast. We want to get 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. We want it to be loud, over 100 decibels. We want it to be reliable, 99.999% reliability. We want it to be efficient, over 50 miles per gallon. Yet achieving all of those may not be realistic. And so as we go through the actual delivery, trade-offs have to be made. And we see those deliveries still as being rather effective. We're achieving most of these goals, maybe some of them not quite there yet, but getting quite close to the point where we say, hey, we feel that this delivery was quite effective. Yet, after all of this, you've got CIOs saying, hey, we ended up accumulating a ton of tech debt trying to balance, these really unrealistic and competing objectives while still sticking with these timelines. The CEO at this point has gone back to the board, and while the delivery was happening, he promised them 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. Now he's getting 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, and he's not sure what he's supposed to tell the board. While the users are saying, hey, I just wanted this to be reliable and efficient. Now I've got something that's so loud, I can't even drive through my neighborhood. Well, I guess I'll just walk, and I'm not going to use it after all. And so we end up with unrealized value, where we started from this massive, strong business case. We delivered effectively against the OKRs that were set, yet the value is not being realized because objectives were misaligned, and therefore the key results that we set out to achieve uh, were not realistic, and the trade-offs that were happening may not have been visible. And so really, how is that happening? It's coming down to the decisions that we make from where we invest all the way uh, through scaling, implementing, and deciding where to go from there. And starting from where do we invest? In that first phase, we're thinking about where should we invest? What are the key objectives that we set? And the common failure points that we see here, right, are number one, hype over value. So being so excited about the idea that the value case just isn't realistic. Conflicting objectives and key results. So taking what the business is saying, putting it into the key objectives that we want to achieve, yet not necessarily accounting for the trade-offs between the reality of how we achieve those various objectives. And as a result, there are unrecognized risks that we take into the beginning of these deployments. When we go to build, then and decide, things like what should we build, what should our blueprints be looking like, how do we manage trade-offs throughout this process? What ends up happening is, number one, invisible trade-offs. So trade-offs are being made by working teams on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, yet it's very difficult for leadership to be able to see what's happening across those trade-offs. The objectives of the overall transformation program are oftentimes not center stage as those trade-off decisions are being made. And as a result, we suffer what we like to call death by 1,000 cuts. So many of these decisions are happening, and slowly, 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 our ability to meet these objectives or do so on time or do so within a reasonable amount of technical debt begins to erode. When we then go to implement, we should really be deciding around how we can manage the change, where we can improve over time. But oftentimes we've spent so much time, effort building that there may be insufficient training. The way in which the technology is integrated into actual processes may not be fully defined. And when we do see failure points start to happen throughout the course of the deployment, it becomes very difficult to learn and improve and adjust such that we can ensure success. And so then when we get to the point where we want to decide, hey, how's this going? Do we want to scale this implementation, this transformation further? Do we want to maintain it as is? Do we want to eliminate it? It becomes very, very difficult to do so for a number of reasons, some of which include the folks who own the product are not the actual users oftentimes. the outcomes that we initially set to achieve in those key results, we laid them out very nicely in the business case, yet what happened in reality typically is not tracked. And there's unclear accountability to those key results. And so the decisions around scale, maintaining, killing the program itself become very muddied. On top of that, these transformation decisions are happening really at a massive, massive scale. From investment decisions, maybe hundreds of portfolio decisions being made each year. As we go through the transformation itself, each of these transformations, really tens of thousands of decisions happening from defining our blueprints, our architectures, our data, the designs that we're going to go with, incremental requests that come in, how we balance all of those trade-offs, to then looking at our overall portfolio of investments and deciding what do we actually do with these. And so, of course, for leadership to be really deciding all these things becomes quite overwhelming. And this effect of having all of these decisions that are difficult to manage really is compounded by the realities of large, complex organizations where we've got a lack of interconnectivity between across the value chain pillars of the business, across various products, business units, etc. And really that creates key barriers to being able to optimize some of these decision-making processes, relating to some of the key ones we mentioned before, including the lack of visibility to be able to see the trade-offs that are happening. Fragmented communication, so not everybody being aware of what's actually happening. No base of knowledge, shared knowledge transparency across these key decisions, and as a result, a lack of alignment or just totally skipping the alignment altogether as we go through these programs. And really, as a result of these massive investments being made, not realizing we want them to, all the decisions that are happening at that level of complexity, organizations are starting to rethink how they manage governance across the decisions that happen across these programs. Going from what they do typically today, complex governance processes that at the end of the day, folks oftentimes struggle to fully understand and therefore struggle to always follow, leading to long decision cycles, or sometimes the processes being skipped altogether and therefore not having the chance to properly evaluate the trade-offs, and spending a lot of time on progress updates as opposed to being completely focused on the outcomes and key results that we're trying to drive. And so what does it mean to rethink that, and what can we be doing? So rather than the complex governance processes, how can we make those easier by establishing very clear guidelines for how we evaluate changes and balance trade-offs as decisions come up within our teams? And then empowering those teams with the decentralized decision authority to go ahead, make those decisions, yet have the escalation paths when they need them. And rather than just tracking progress, really focusing on what matters, the key decisions, and ultimately the outcomes that matter to provide visibility. And through doing this, empowering leaders really at all levels, from those driving the work and making the decisions, to be able to do so without overly cumbersome governance, and being able to do so quickly while giving the leadership still the ability to be able to understand what's happening and intervene if necessary. And really the solution, the way that we see it and how you can go about this, is agile decision governance. And so what does that really mean? What's contained within that? So the first part of that is structure, meaning we need to structure the decisions that we are going to be making, from the decisions around investing through the ones happening all the way through really that technology life cycle, so that the way in which we can go about them is very clear. Everybody can follow those best practices and be empowered to balance trade-offs. We need to have clear orchestration as we go through this, enable decision making at the lowest possible levels of the organization while maintaining the transparency to what happened, how does that impact, the outcomes and key results that we're driving towards, and having the clear escalation paths, capturing holistically enough that we can go back and adjust if we need to and really understand the impact, including what did we decide? Why did we decide it? Who is the team involved? Did we have the right people? And what was the expected outcome? How do we expect really specifically that to impact the key results that we're driving towards? And then tracking that at a programmatic level, the progress, the outcomes, technical KPIs, business KPIs, from deviations in tech debt to the specific outcomes that we're driving towards. And what we see that approach enabling is a few things. So we're now able to systematize the best practices across our various teams, across these programs, to make sure that we don't necessarily need quite as many meetings to be able to facilitate these trade-off discussions. They can happen efficiently, yet still happen effectively. As a result, we can reduce, technical debt, rework from going back and doing these things, and effectively mitigate risks while improving visibility to what's happening, driving accountability for the outcomes that we may have lost otherwise early on, and ultimately accelerating alignment across teams and delivering the value sooner. And this principle of how we approach decision making across these technology transformations really can be applied across the end-to-end technology lifecycle, from where we invest such that we make sure that we are validating the value, learning from the past, not recreating the wheel, and tracking outcomes to ensure that we actually achieve what we set out to. How we build such that we can empower the teams to be balancing trade-offs and yet give the leadership the opportunity to intervene when needed, and when we see some of the outcomes or key results beginning to falter, and being able to do so early rather than much later when it may be either too late or much more costly to do so. Ensure we're actually being embedded in processes and more specifically establishing a learning loop. And that learning loop, particularly as we're doing AI implementations, we're deploying agents, et cetera, becomes absolutely critical in being able to continuously improve the technology that we're deploying. And then ultimately, when we're at the point where we've invested, we've built, we've implemented, and we need to choose whether we're going to scale this, maintain it, eliminate the program, we have the ability to understand who's accountable for the key results, gather inputs really efficiently across the key owners, and then ultimately turn that knowledge into actionable decision data such that we can make data-driven decisions really around how we can optimize our portfolio. And so on the next few pages, I'll just go through quickly an example across each of these, what that might look like. Okay, so when we upfront are going to invest, really what should we be doing? We should be asking, first of all, should we invest in this technology or AI transformation? Investigating the right things from, have others tried this before? Did it work? Did it not? What happened? If it didn't work and it failed before and we're trying to do the same thing again, let's stop. Or, maybe we learned from the past, we've incorporated changes, something's different now. Okay, great, let's go ahead. Looking at how much value does the idea really have? Is there enough value to justify going through with this? being very precise on the specific outcomes so that we know how that value is actually going to be realized. And if we can't get precise about that, again, we shouldn't be going forward. But if we can, fantastic, let's keep going. But just saying, hey, there's value that we're going to achieve and outcomes that we want to go after, as we've seen with that, the examples is not always enough. We also need to make sure that that value upfront is validated quickly, efficiently, effectively, such that we don't have unrealistic expectations of what we actually might be able to achieve. And finally, we need to align upfront on how trade-offs will be managed, right? Because almost always there's going to be trade-offs across programs of how we balance competing objectives from technical or business objectives, timelines, etc. We need to make sure that we're not setting out with, a house of cards, meaning, hey, one thing happens, the whole thing collapses. But we've got clear guidelines that are reasonable and achievable around how we can manage the trade-offs. And ultimately, as we're going through with the investment on the other side, we're able to track the expected outcomes and key results, the actual realization of those, as well as attach that to uh, the clear responsibility.
Sam, one question came in around, it's one thing to have these decisions as a starting point, but how do you map all the different decisions that need to be made in these types of initiatives, right?
Hmm.
Should we invest in this tech AI transformation as a high level, right?
Hmm.
Decision?
It's a great question.
But how do you get to the core tactical decisions to be made?
Yeah, fantastic question. So, as many times those core tactical decisions begin to happen in the build phase, and that's where we need to understand, first off, the sequence of what's going to be happening. The way that these decisions are typically mapped is it can happen in a couple ways. One way is starting from the existing processes and what are the decisions going to be made. The other way is we start from what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve. In order to achieve those objectives, these are the key decisions that need to be made along the way. And so what that typically ends up looking like for a technology transformation is there are upfront decisions where we define how we're going to realize the objectives that were set out from setting up blueprints, setting up reference architecture, setting up data, etc. And we get to those decisions by understanding within this program, what are the various, for example, work streams that are going about, what are they trying to achieve, and therefore what do they need to decide. And there's also typically escalations or changes that may happen. So we have fantastic laid out plans as we're actually going through the implementation. Unforeseen things arise. And so that's kind of the next set of decisions that typically need to happen around how do we react to those changes? How do we adjust, etc. And so kind of to that point, right, around when we're actually going to build out, how does that work. And so the example here is saying, hey, we're in the building process. We've already defined our blueprints, how we're going to go about and do this. They align to our OKRs, but something came up. There's a new unmet need, and we want to decide how we're going to do that. And so in order to do that, we continue to take that approach centered around the decision to be made, where we've defined how we're going to break down those silos across the org with clear responsibility of who's going to be providing these inputs and making sure that we're considering the right items. So if we've got an incremental need, for example, understanding the incremental business value, but also whether or not that aligns to the core objectives that we set out to achieve in the first place, what the cost, effort, technical debt trade-offs are in including that in our scope, then tracking those decisions at the lowest possible level, escalating if we need to, but if we don't, for example, setting very clear boundaries of how we might go about that, and then tracking that so that we can enable the learning going forward. And I just want to make sure that for whoever asked that question or clear.
Yep.
Awesome. So then as we're going through now onto the implementation side of things. And so in this example, thinking about in particular implementing agentic systems that might be going all the way through to perform some kind of task, actually make a decision and execute it. What becomes extremely critical is learning from uh, what the outcome was, whether it was good enough or not, which is where tracking what did we decide, did we use this or not, why, becomes an absolutely critical part of establishing learning loops and enabling our technology deployments, even if they're not optimal at the start, to continuously improve over time. And then when we get to the point of, all right, we've deployed, we've got our existing portfolio. How do we actually go about deciding, our, what are typically called like time dispositions? What are we going to tolerate? What are we going to invest? What are we going to migrate or eliminate? And so then the way in which we actually go about gathering those inputs and assembling that data becomes critical, making sure that we can efficiently kind of orchestrate the input across typically regionally and globally functionally dispersed teams and organize it around then the specific decisions that we have to make going forward around how we can optimize our portfolio. And then across all of these, really making sure again that those governance approval escalation paths are as simple as possible, yet we're maintaining clear records of what we decided as why, what we decided and why, and we're continuing to have visibility to the outcomes and decisions along the way. Just a couple quick examples before I get into a brief demo and then really open it up for Q&A. So, a leading consumer packaged goods company in this case was getting frustrated with the spiraling complexity within a major technology transformation uh, program. And so, in this case, what happened is they first off implemented very specific best practice frameworks around how to evaluate architectural trade-offs across, as additional business requests were coming in, how to bring in those various teams. And then as they began tracking those decisions, they were also then able to track not just what is the technical debt that we have accumulated up until this point, but what is the potential technical debt that we're going to begin incurring because of these decisions that have happened where we haven't actually built something yet, but we've agreed to. And really what that enabled, one is having those structured frameworks decentralized a lot of the decision making, made it so it didn't have to happen in meetings and significantly accelerated it. In addition, because of the visibility and the ability for because of the visibility, because of the structured frameworks where we could understand how to balance the trade-offs, and the visibility ultimately for leadership to be able to intervene when needed, what we ended up seeing was a very significant reduction in the technical debt. So, around $35 million of potential technical debt um, getting eliminated before it became reality. Another example here was just around a large, again in this case, consumer company that was struggling now with the complexity of their portfolio and really understanding, hey, we've got a lot of costs, a lot of complexity, but not having a clear path to how do we make data-driven decisions to effectively rationalize. And so really here, what the team did in terms of, driving that agile decision governance was establishing very consistent, standardized criteria around how they would review each of these applications, getting it out to the right accountable people across, really in this case, global regions, and being able to trace that information and turn it not just into qualitative feedback, but into very specific and malleable data that could be then leveraged for making the decisions. And as a result, in this case, around 27% of the applications were able to be eliminated, and most of them because of the realization that the outcomes that they set out to achieve, completely were not being achieved at the time.
Sam, one question came in
Mhm.
about actually the change management required to actually implement some of these types of programs, and
Mhm.
how do you actually start?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, from a change management perspective, um, there's a couple of things that uh, need to happen. So, first off, the business and technical leadership ideally needs to be aligned to this way of uh, management, and so the value of this type of approach really needs to be um, socialized at that leadership level, number one. Number two, from a change management perspective, is a deep understanding of the ways of working among the individual teams. So, how are they making uh, their decisions or trade-offs uh, today, such that when we kind of overlay these, you know, the right frameworks, they become incremental to the current ways of working. Number one, and number two, um, not just another additive thing. And by that I mean understanding what's already being tracked elsewhere, what other types of reporting or responsibilities do these folks have, such that this is truly an enabler and not a burden. And then number three is really a deep understanding of the processes that exist, such that the both the decision making and the uh, reporting and tracking can smoothly integrate into those. And the benefits of gaining all this visibility really can be realized. Thank you for the question.
Thank you,
Um,
Sam.
so with that, I'm going to jump over to a quick demo, and then I will open it up to questions for the remainder of the time. And give me just 1 minute here as I transition screens. Okay. So, as users come into, in this case, the Cloverpop platform, as part of a team that may be managing decisions, everything from, initial investments to decisions being made maybe throughout the course of a large program like this, they can come in and understand, okay, I might need to be creating a decision. I can go ahead and do that, see the templates that might be relevant to me. Or I can search my decision bank and see a history of the decisions that were made by me, my team, others involved, etc. As well as, at my fingertips, understand, what are the key actions around these decisions that I might need to be taking. When I go to create a decision, I'll see the templates that are relevant to me. In this case, maybe we're thinking about, an initial business case. We can take a look at that, understand really what's the structure here. In this case, looking at the idea, have we learned from the past, so on and so forth, and similar to the framework that we were discussing before, as well as some of the key folks that might be involved in this process. We can go ahead, create our decision, provide relevant context. Uh, if we need to understand, hey, maybe we're missing something, we can just leverage the AI to see, hey, is there some other ideas or some other elements we want to make sure that we consider here, and then we can go ahead and deploy it, bringing in the various folks in this process, getting notified to come in and join. And so as we're working through this, various people can provide their inputs asynchronously in their own time while following, very specific guidelines. They've gotten the notification directly in their email. They can come right in here and provide that. Uh, and we start to see, the decision coming together. What was the idea that we were going after? Did we try to do this before? What was our business case? So on and so forth. On the validation, validating from various folks, and then being able to synthesize across that to understand, is this realistic or not? And as we begin to gather all of that information and have a clear understanding of how we might move forward, we can get to a point where we can, generate a recommendation about what we might want to do, of course, based on the underlying structure of what we have in here. If it's relevant, we can go ahead and say, yes, this is what we want to be doing. And then as relevant, request approvals across the chain, so on and so forth. And once we get to the point where we've got the approvals, the decision is logged. Really, what we've been able then to capture is, what did we decide and why? Who are all of the folks involved? What were some of the data sources that we leveraged? And what was the logic structure and really the key support behind that? We can then always find that information uh, within our decision bank. But really on top of that, all of the data that we're logging from the decision, the rationale, other specific elements that we may be tracking around potential investments, technical debt, outcomes, etc., can be leveraged, visualized, so that we can see really across the program or within specific decisions, what's happening, how often are the decisions getting made, how many people are typically involved, what are the various team dynamics, how long is it taking these decisions to get made, where are we seeing bright spots or spots where we might have a little bit more challenge, and perhaps most importantly, are folks as they go through this really considering what we need them to be considering. How often are they considering those questions? How confident are they in the responses that are being provided? And then really, how can we continue to iterate on these frameworks by understanding how successful were we in achieving our outcomes when we did or didn't consider these specific considerations. And so with that, I'm going to pause. I'll go back to just the slides really quickly here. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, as we get more complex, just the architecture here is, highly scalable from, just the specific decision workflows, the AI kind of modules, whether there's assistants underneath or, connected to specific data sources or human inputs, can help enable, kind of continued acceleration and governance throughout. So, team, thank you, and just again, want to open it up to any additional questions that you guys might have.
Thank you so much, Sam. So as you have some additional questions, please just type them into the Q&A box, and I'll moderate the Q&A portion of this chat. Sam, one question that came in was around interconnectivity with other systems. So how do you manage either inbound or outbound connectivity?
Yeah, great question. So the system can be connected with APIs both on an inbound and an outbound basis. Typically on the inbound side, doing things from, starting decisions automatically based on some sort of it may be some sort of an external trigger. So early warning of, hey, something came up and we need to therefore trigger a decision to happen. It may be a process-driven trigger of, hey, when the way that we start this process is by initiating a decision, or it may be that, for example, we've got like a RAID log. We're tracking our risks, and when something gets elevated to the point where a decision needs to be made, we can then within that just trigger the decision to start as it gets escalated to a decision to be made. And so that's kind of on the inbound piece. On the outbound side, the so this can really integrate where we need it to. In some cases, it might need to be integrated with, for example, Jira to understand, the link back to, what do we decide here, so we can make sure that our delivery aligns to the original objectives, or it just might be linking the specific data to integrate into overall programmatic dashboards that just stay live for management to be able to look into on an as needed basis.
Great. Sam, thank you so much for the presentation today. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. Again, this presentation has been recorded. It'll be available on demand. We'll also send out this presentation to everybody that's joined. So thank you so much. Again, if you have any further questions, feel free to email myself or Sam. Our emails are right here. You could also book another demo at cloverpop.com. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Friday and have an amazing weekend. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.